We welcome on San Francisco Giants catcher Patrick Bailey to the Just Baseball Show. Pat, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm really excited to have the conversation. How's spring training going?
Going good. It's going good. I feel like goodness for 3 or 4 weeks into it now. Freaking flies by and only got a couple more weeks left, but so far so good.
What's the adjustment? We asked Grayson Rodriguez the same thing the other day, and I'm really fascinated from the catching perspective too. What's the adjustment for you, or like what's some differences maybe as your first spring training coming off of a big league season now as a catcher?
Yeah, it's definitely a little different. In previous camps, you're trying to really make a name for yourself and earn a spot, and now that that's kind of changed, you kind of have a opportunity to kind of focus on the relationships you're building with the pitchers and the pitching staff, and kind of continuing to develop that as kind of what we worked on during the season, and kind of if anyone showed up with some new stuff, and then just kind of the goals that we're trying to do as a staff and each individual arm. So it's definitely a better feeling for sure. But yeah, it's been new and it's been fun so far.
How was that adjustment coming up from the minor leagues, right? Because you played 97 games and you put up one of the best defensive seasons in Major League Baseball in such a short amount of time. So to go from the minors to the majors, not being able to have that spring, what was it like to just kind of get dropped in there with a whole new pitching staff?
Yeah, I mean, luckily I think I had three big league camps before. So I had some familiarity with Webby and Cobb, and obviously Keaton and Kyle Harrison getting called up, Ryan Walker. So I had some familiarity with a lot of the staff, and did a really good job of kind of preaching what our philosophies were. And so I had a really good understanding of kind of what the Giants were trying to do from a pitching side. Um, but obviously, getting right into it, you're trying to build that trust as fast as you can with Cobb and Webb and our staff and relievers, and so that was kind of my main focus, getting called up and just trying to get the best out of them and kind of earn their trust, because kind of once you have that, then you can start rolling.
You mentioned some new stuff from guys. Is there been anything or any new pitches or something you could tease maybe from some of the guys on the staff that you've seen in the early going here that maybe Giants fans can get excited about? I know it's kind of like new pitch season where people are always getting overexcited about certain things, but when the guy who's actually catching them is able to talk about maybe a new pitch or something that looks a little bit different, then I think it's time to get a little more excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, we got some guys throwing some cutters. I think Kyle had a cutter last year. We're just trying to kind of refine it and figure out what we're trying to do with it, and what areas we're trying to exploit with hitters' weaknesses and whatnot. And then Keaton, I think he's came into camp, been able to spin it a little bit better. So we're hoping to get something that kind of can move away from the right-handed bats to take some pressure off the split and the fastball. And then Webby's just continuing to do what he's doing. He doesn't have to change much, and obviously um, Cobb's still doing his thing. He can wake up and want to learn a new pitch, and it's the nastiest pitch ever. It just determines on if we want to throw it or not. So he's a fun guy to be around.
Is the cutter coming in more of an organizational thing, right? Did the Giants want to implement a cutter to most of their pitchers, or was that a case by case basis that you just felt when pitchers came into camp that a lot of them were trying the cutter?
I think it's a case by case thing for sure. I don't know if it's an organizational thing, but I feel like that's kind of. I feel like a lot of pitchers, if they don't have a cutter, it's like, yeah, let me mess around with this and see how it is. I don't want to say it would be an easy pitch to learn, because I'm not a pitcher. I think it depends a lot with kind of arm slot, and if they're more supinated or pronation biased. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's an organizational thing.
When did you start to feel like you had a knack for handling a staff? And like I want to get into the actual fundamentals and defensive side of things, but just in terms of being able to handle a staff and everything that goes into it, and realizing that, hey, I'm actually a guy that can help pitchers get the most out of themselves. Like, was that something that you started to realize maybe in college, or did that start to happen for you in the minor leagues, or even later?
Yeah, I think it was sooner. I think it was in high school, kind of having the travel circuit and whatnot. Um, I didn't have like any of the big invitations for Perfect Game and Under Armour and all that fun stuff, but I was able to make the USA team, and I couldn't hit a lick. Like, couldn't hit it all in high school. Um, but I made the high school USA team, so that's kind of when I figured out, I was like, all right, like I can have a lot of value behind the plate. I can bring a lot of value to a team for what I do defensively. And as a catcher, that kind of starts with your pitchers, like if you can be able to get the best out of them, that's going to help me stay out there. That's going to help the team get wins. And so that's really when I had the first understanding. And then thankfully the bats come a long way as well, and just kind of try to continue to progress on all of that.
And speaking about, the early parts of your career, you grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. You were drafted by the Twins in the 37th round, but instead of going straight to the big leagues, you decided to go to NC State. Wondering what led to that decision, right? You're playing on Team USA. You get drafted by a big league squad, but you decided to go to NC State.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of forget I get drafted there. I remember I think Twin Scout called me. I was like, "Hey, we drafted you. Don't think it's going to come to anything, but remember us in a couple years." So it's just kind of a funny conversation. But picking NC State, relatively easy. I wanted to play in a Power Five conference, so that checked the list. There weren't a ton of catchers that were recruited, I guess, in the same time frame as me there. So it was kind of not a super full catching room. And then, they've had some success behind the plate with, guys like Brett Austin, Andrew Kisner, and whatnot. So I was excited about that. And then Elliot Avent was one of the best people I've ever been around, still is to this day, have a great relationship. And he really felt like it was kind of their honor for me to come play there, which meant a lot to me. And it was a really good experience there. Nothing but great things to say about NC State and Coach Avent.
You put up great numbers there, though, too. And you talked about how the bats come a long way. Obviously, what you were able to do there made you, a middle of the first round pick, really closer to the top 10. And a lot of success in the early parts of your minor league career as well, but just really being able to see it click on another level and start to produce at the big league level. Where was the point where you started to see the offense translate? Because you're also a switch hitter. I'm interested to ask you a little bit about that. But where did you start to realize, like, hey, I can hit enough to play at the big league level?
Yeah, I mean, the hitting really didn't come until my freshman spring. I had a terrible freshman fall. It was actually laughable, just to joke about it around the players and whatnot that I used to play at NC State with and the coaches. But that spring, I think just finally kind of physically maturing, getting in the weight room and whatnot, building some strength. I think that helped the most, just being able to hit the ball harder. And then, being able to have success in the ACC in college kind of gives you that confidence. And I think that's when I started like, all right, like I can swing the bat a little bit. I can do what I need to do at the plate and combine that with what I can do behind the plate. It's like, all right, I think I got a chance here.
With the stick, it does seem that when the lights are bright, 2 outs, runners in scoring position, you're the man. You have an 801 OPS last year with 2 outs, 969 OPS with 2 outs, a 969 OPS with runners in scoring position last year, and then a 920 OPS with 2 outs and runners in scoring position. What about the bright lights do you love? You just seem to rake whenever the game's on the line.
I don't know, just trying to slow the game down, not trying to get too big. Sounds like I need to do a little bit better when runners aren't in scoring position, because those are some good numbers. Guess I need to just imagine runners at second and third, but no, I mean just trying to breathe, relax, not trying to do too much, give what the pitcher takes me, all that fun stuff.
I'm always fascinated by switch hitting catchers because it's just amazing in general just how much that goes into the job of catching. You know, of course, talking about everything you've already hit on from handling a staff, and then the things that go into slowing down the run game and blocking and receiving, and then just whatever's left is what you can do on the offensive side. But someone like you got two swings to worry about as well. And what's interesting to me is in the 2022 season, you know, in the minor leagues, you were much more productive from the left side. And then in your big league stint, you're actually more productive from the right side. Is there a side of the plate that you've been, you know, more comfortable with through the years? And is there any reason why that you could think, I know it's a small sample size at the end of the day, but why you were, you know, much better from the right side in 23 versus 2022?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it depends on the day whether one swing feels good or the other. Sometimes they both feel good, sometimes they both don't. But I think going into this year, I mean, when I got called up, I was basically like, from the right side, I'm just going to put up good at bats. I'm going to try to simplify things as much as I can. I'm going to try to hit the ball up the middle, like really, really simplify it as much as I can. Swing at strikes, take my walks. And I think that was probably the biggest difference for me from the minor leagues to the big leagues from the right side. Just a lot of simplicity. A lot of pressure was taken off. I guess the bat, when, you know, I got called up, I knew that if I wanted to stick, I needed to catch. And that was, again, kind of my value is coming from there. When you're in the minor leagues, it's kind of, you know, a lot of times you got to hit your way up the levels. So I think for the most part, I put a lot of pressure at the plate in the minor leagues, and especially early on in the big leagues, I was like, all right, like what I can do at the plate's a bonus. I'm going to do what I can behind the plate to, you know, help us win games.
Do you feel like catchers generally in the minors have to kind of hit their way up a little bit because there's not as much maybe in-depth data and things like that? I know teams have it at the end of the day, but like there's just a different level. I feel like when you can get to the big leagues and then we see all of the advanced stats and just how elite you are in so many different departments. Like, do you feel that like that's part of it? And then the second prong of that would be, did you realize, I mean, I knew you obviously knew you were always a good defender, but did you ever realize that you could be one of the best in the big leagues right away?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer the first one. I mean, you can have an understanding of what a guy can do behind the plate, and it's just, I feel like it's just kind of how it is. Where, you know, if you hit, you get called up. You know, I think the game's growing to where it's kind of, all right, what is this guy doing overall as a player? How's he in the field? How's he doing at the plate? How is he base running? All that fun stuff. And then that kind of determines, all right, where's this guy going to be? How's he going to get caught up and whatnot? So that's exciting to see. And then secondly, I would say I knew I could be one of the best in the big leagues behind the plate. That's kind of what I've always done. That's what I've been known for. So I had the utmost confidence coming up, knowing what I can do, and receiving wise, throwing. Needed to block better than what I did last year, and then just working with the pitching staff, like that was what I was the least worried about.
Where does this confidence in yourself come from? Because it illuminates on the field. You can see it, right? As the moment you stepped on the field, the field general, right? It felt like I was watching like a young Chris Paul, right, from the NBA. Where does that confidence stem from?
I guess just doing it for a while. I mean, I feel like I try to slow the game down as much as I can behind the plate and at the plate as well. But if I can be a stoic, a tranquil presence, no matter what's going on, where, you know, pitchers, position players, like you're always looking at the catcher. If I can be that sense of calmness behind the plate, I feel like that's always a bonus. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm trying to emulate.
I think one of the more I wouldn't say misunderstood, but I think just like lack of general knowledge around the position is the catching position where, fans just don't really totally know what goes into every little piece of it. You talk about receiving and blocking and all the little things, but what is it that makes a certain catcher just so much more proficient at receiving? Blocking makes sense. It's athleticism, sliding, moving around a little bit, but I want to key in a little bit more specifically on receiving. What makes a catcher so proficient with their receiving, and how much of that do you think is teachable and I guess developmental versus just something that you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. Obviously, I mean, you need good, quick hands. For me, I think a lot of it stems from just your prep work, kind of call it relaxation before the pitch. As a hitter, you're trying to match the shape of a pitch. As a catcher, you're trying to do the same thing. So if a slider's breaking to my right foot, I'm trying to relax my glove outside of it so that when I come up to catch, I'm not trying to move the pitch, but the work I did before catching the pitch allows it to be a quick motion, and super fluid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And how much that goes into that would be, I guess, knowing the arsenal of your pitchers as well, right? Because you mentioned knowing the shape of it. Like, do you put a lot of time into obviously just catching bullpens and things like that, but just even extra time into knowing the exact movement patterns of each of these pitches so that you can get yourself there, before the ball gets there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's all of it. Like it's a great point. You watch a catcher and you can kind of get an idea of how comfortable they are with the pitcher. And that's a big thing for me in spring training is kind of seeing all the shapes again, catching the new guys, figuring out what their pitches are doing. A lot of times the hardest ones for me are like the big misses. Is the backup breaking ball? Is it backing up? Is it still moving? If they really yank it glove side, like how much more is that moving? Is the sinker still getting that horizontal run glove side? Is it more arm side? This, that, and the other. Because again, like the shapes play a huge role in it, and you really got to match the move with your glove with what the ball's doing.
That comfort level with the pitcher was taken to the nth degree in what I think is quite possibly the greatest game ever framed. You, Alex Cobb. Now, it was a near no-hitter, but in that game, 28 called strikes. And I watched every pitch of that game. There was a lot that you were lying to the umpire. And what I mean by that is you were pulling it right off the black, right into the strike zone, and the umpire was giving it to you. It was pure art watching you and Alex Cobb just work through that lineup. Can you walk us through that game and that experience? Because at a catcher, right, it's your rookie year. Alex Cobb is on the mound. I'm sure it gave Giants fans, memories of when Matt Cain and Buster Posey were there too. Can you just walk us through the near no-hitter and what I think is the greatest game ever framed, or at least close?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a tough one to go back to. I think a couple nights after that game, I remember waking up and I was like, man, we threw one too many splitters. So I always kick myself for that. I think he threw the most splitters ever in that game. But you talk about getting called strikes. I mean, whether they're off the plate or on the plate, like Cobb's always throwing it where he wants to. I mean, you're getting more called strikes if you're hitting your spot. And he's always putting that splitter right below the zone. He's backdooring the sinker to righties. He's front hipping it to lefties. He's going in the righties. I mean, he can do more than a lot of pitchers can, and it's really fun to work with him backdoor or work with him out there. He can backdoor a curveball like it's nothing, just on the corner, just off the plate to the lefty. So it was a super fun game. 1 out away. I felt for him bad, and maybe we can get it done this year.
What does it feel like in the ninth inning when you got that line? I mean, what's that feeling like?
That was that was probably the most intense locked in I've been on a baseball field. Like gut was turning a little bit. It's kind of undescribable how you feel, and everyone on the field can feel it. Everyone in the stands. Slater caught that ball in the 8th with 2 outs, and every no hitter has like that catch, that play. And so I was like, oh man, like there it is. We had that catch, we had that play, like, this is gonna happen. Sure enough, it didn't, but it was a really cool moment to be a part of for sure.
Is there a specific pitch type that you feel like is just more conducive to being able to steal strikes for you? Like, is it those splitters at the bottom of the zone that you're able to pull up? Is it, maybe something breaking the other way that you're able to kind of frame on the outside or inside? Is there a certain pitch that you just feel you can just kind of sell a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a good question. Change up splitters are moving down, so I would say those are probably just below the zone. Backdoor sinkers that have that sharp action late. Webby and Cobb do a great job of that, getting those. Late breaking sliders just off. I think a lot of it comes from pitchers and how well they do really filling up the zone. You see it in a game. A guy comes out, it's not throwing strikes, walking guys. They don't get the borderline pitches. If guys are filling it up, if they're throwing strikes, if they're hitting their spots, you tend to get those edges, and you tend to get the 2-strike breaking balls just off the pitch before he dotted a backdoor 2-seam and whatnot. So I think it's a combination of the pitcher and the catcher. And yeah, I mean, the more strikes guys throw, I feel like the more strikes the umpires like to call.
Is there kind of a pitcher, because, right, you can go from an opener, maybe with Ryan Walker, over to a guy who's handling the middle innings, all the way to Camilo Doval. Is there one guy, and maybe it is Camilo Doval, that it's just kind of a pain to frame for because he's throwing 102 miles an hour?
I would probably say Tyler Rogers. He gets probably the most egregious calls, just because it's funky. Like, it's funky for hitters, it's funky for me, it's funky for the umpire. I feel like that's like all we talk about when he throws. So he gets misses out of the zone, but he also gets a lot of strikes called balls. So it kind of goes both ways with him. Duvall, man, I feel like for the most part, when he's filling it up, like it's a lot of fastballs, relatively middle up, and then breaking balls kind of back foot to lefties and kind of just off to righties. So I feel like he's good. I mean, Ryan Walker's tough. He's a tough guy to catch, but that's just because he's throwing from left center field and throwing 96 and he's got a sweeper at like 20. So he's nasty, but I'd say Tyler Rogers out of that group for sure.
How much have you studied like TrackMan data now, and just knowing the ins and outs of what makes a pitcher effective? And I have some friends that either were former catchers, retired, and now working for teams that have taught me so much of what I know about what goes into pitch shapes and what makes what do what. Like, is that something that you've always been fascinated by, or as you became a professional, realizing that could be something that really makes you better at your job? Like, is that something that you're always diving into on the data side?
Yeah, for sure. I've always been invested in kind of how pitchers work, how pitchers get outs, what makes them click in high school, college. And then from the TrackMan side, that really happened in pro ball. Just talking with, the pitching development side, the pitching coaches, the pitchers, really figuring out, what shapes we're looking for, the tilt, this, that, and the other. Because for me, like, I go back to, all right, what makes Logan Webb good? What makes Kyle Harrison good? And for me to understand that, I got to know what makes them good. And TrackMan usually does a good job of telling you that. And so I think it's probably the best cheat sheet you could have, where you don't have to go, obviously you want to see how it plays against hitters, but you can usually tell if it's a plus pitch on TrackMan, it's probably going to be a plus pitch against hitters, because there's a reason that, TrackMan or the analysts see it as a good pitch. And so, you're wanting to pitch off that. So I think it's very important for catchers and for me to have an understanding of TrackMan and the data. And, I try to hang out with our analysts as much as we can. Pretty smart people.
You obviously have, you're crazy detailed, whether that be in the data, on the field. We have, some coaches who listen to this podcast, younger players. And I'm sure if they could ask you a question about a couple of tips, whether that be framing or locking down the run game or blocking, what are maybe some few things that you wish you could tell your 12-year-old self or your 15-year-old high school body?
Yeah, I think one thing that I wish I would have understood earlier is quality is a lot better than quantity. As when you're 12, 13, 14, you can take 300 swings and they all feel good, but how many of those swings are really quality? And that's probably my biggest, I wouldn't say regret, because it kind of built that foundation of hard work. But, I always think back to, like, man, what could it have been if those swings were maybe with more purpose, or if those swings were, dialed in a little bit more, if it was less swings, but better intent. So that's where I'm trying to get at now, is really maximizing my, I guess, efficiency and work, where, every swing I take in a day is, I want it to be relatively game-like or with high intent, so that I'm not just going through the motions. And then same thing, catching-wise, just when I'm putting in work, I want it to be at the highest level. And yeah, I think that's big. And then, catching, catch as much as you can as you're young. Catch bullpens. I think that was the biggest thing that helped me when, I was 12, 13, 14. I went to this place called the North Carolina Baseball Academy in Greensboro. Scott Bankhead, he pitched like 10 years in the big leagues. Did lessons there, and whenever he had a high school or college arm he didn't want to catch, he'd call me and say, "Hey, come catch this guy for me." So I called probably hundreds of bullpens, and I think that's kind of where I developed a confidence behind the plate, and then also just an understanding of pitching from listening to him and what he's telling the guys.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And it's one of those things that I think a lot of kids are like, I don't want to go catch that bullpen. Like, I don't feel like doing that. Usually players will be complaining about that, but it's an opportunity to get some reps in. The last one for me is just kind of your focus going into 24 and what you are, kind of hoping to improve and build on. Obviously it was an incredibly successful season for you. A really exciting rookie year where you've solidified yourself as kind of the future behind the dish for this Giants franchise. What are you building towards now going into 24?
Yeah, a big one for me is continuing to develop a relationship with the pitchers, old guys, new guys, just figuring out what makes them click. Keep getting better receiving, throwing. Want to be a much better blocker this year. I didn't think I did a good job of that last year. Not good enough. I think I can be better. And then hitting, just being more consistent. I was super happy with some of the success I had, and kind of gives me the confidence that knowing I can do this at the highest level. But the last couple months were tough, and just need to figure out how to keep those the cold months, make it a cold week, make it a cold 2 or 3 days, and then grind out ABs. I think a lot of that will come just from nutrition in the weight room. I lost a lot of weight last year. And so this year I've put it back on. I've probably in the best shape and strength wise I've been, and big emphasis for me is just keeping my weight on and keeping just being able to be at my best in August, September, October.
Really appreciate you coming on, my man. This was a great conversation, and I'm really excited for you next year, right? Because you played 97 games, you put up a 3-win season immediately. can't wait to see what you do in 24, my man.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely.